use your hands. I've been excited to share this with more people. I've never heard anyone else explain it like I'm about to explain it to you. So buckle up. Now, I usually have to say, does that make sense? Or do you get that? Do you understand it? Because this is kind of outside the box thinking. It's going to you're going to have to shift your mind a little bit to understand this. But once you do understand this, it will shift everything you think about and how the body works. So let me be more specific. When I say use your hands, I'm saying use your hands, meaning not using your arms. So we want to use our hands when we move, when we run, when we jump, when we do everything athletically. Our hands should be in charge. See, your hand is the leader. It should be the leader. Your arm is the follower. So your hand is Batman. Your arm is, I don't even think of it as Robin. I don't think it's even that important. It's more like Alfred. The hand is that important. And we use our arms for things. Athletes in their brains, they tap into their arms for movement and for running, because as coaches, we give people cues like use your arms, drive your arms. And neurologically, they start to connect to the arms, and that's not a good thing. We want to reverse that. We want to change that. We want to make sure that our athletes are tapped into these things. You see, we have all of this infrastructure, this coordination, this dexterity already pre-built into our hands, because from a very young age, we play with toys, we write, we type, we text, we do everything with these two things, these hands. And so when we try to coach our athletes to use this limb, which I think of the arm as a dumb limb, it's not smart at all, because we're not sending neurological signals to our arm. I usually like to ask, what do you use your arms for? So just think about that. What do you use your arms for? Usually when I give presentations on this, the only idea that I can come up with is you can carry wood with your arms, because that doesn't require a whole lot of thinking. You just hold it, right? And our eyes deceive us, because it does look like we use our arm. Here's an experiment that you can try. You can do this with your athletes. I do this all the time when I'm trying to explain this and get this point across. Raise your arm, put it over your head, and then put it down. And now raise your hand and put it down. All right, try that one more time. Put your arm over your head, put it down, and put your hand over your head and put it down. It looks like I'm doing the exact same thing, but they're two drastically different ways of getting there. In one way, my arm is leading, my clunky, dumb arm that I don't use for anything. And in the other scenario, my brilliant, coordinated, experienced hand is leading the way, right? You can also do this if you just act like you're running and think with your arms. Use your arms. And then switch to your hands. You might want to stand up for this. Switch back to your arms. Switch back to your hands. Nothing really changes as far as the positions and the shapes, but having the hand lead versus the arm lead does make a significant difference. As we get into some of the athlete examples and coaching scenarios, we're going to go even further into what shapes you should be making and what forces you should be driving and what positions and angles and all that. But just like I would say to my athletes, I hope that makes sense. Does that make sense to you? Is this a good explanation about why we should be using our hands? You see, we already have this infrastructure pre-built. We've been using our hands. We've been using these things since we were born. We don't type. We don't use these two fingers and stick them out and type with our arms. We don't text with our arms, all right? We don't use our arms for that. We're not thinking to this limb. We're thinking to our fingers and our hands. This is where all the coordination lives. This is where all the experience lives. I had an intern who was in PT school, and when I was explaining this concept to him once, something clicked that this was homunculus man. So in medical school, they study homunculus man, and it's kind of a depiction of what your brain sees on the sensory cortex and the motor cortex. And it shows this depiction of what the brain sees, and the hands are extremely large because there's so many neurological connections, because we're always using our hands, that it depicts the hands as being extremely large. Also, the mouth and the tongue are extremely large because we have to have a lot of coordination in our mouth and our tongue because we're using them all the time to talk and form words. And so it's a really cool visual to kind of explain this concept because you can see neurologically, we don't use our arms for things. We don't really use our legs for things. All in all, the hands are where the infrastructure lives. The hands are where all the coordination, all the body control, these are our controllers. These are what we should be utilizing when we think about coaching an athlete. Look at those hands versus those arms. If you see an athlete, and you're going to see these examples, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once you start to see an athlete using their arms, neurologically thinking with their arms as they move and as they run, it will explain a lot. Athletes need to use their hands, not their arms. I used to cue my own kids to drive their elbows back as they were running, because that was a cue that my coaches used with me. I didn't know why I used that cue. I do know why I use that cue. I use that cue because my coaches used it with me, but I never thought about the cue. I just used it because that's what everyone did. And so this, once again, goes into the first principles thinking and some of the early fundamentals that we learned in our athleticism is a skill. We need to not just accept what has been taught to us. We need to actually think about, what are we saying to our athletes? So if you're telling your athlete to drive their arms, hopefully now it makes sense why we need to say, hey, use your hands, use your hands, use your hands. Make sure to subscribe down below, like this video. We appreciate you being here. We'll catch you on the next one.